2 hours, 17 minutes, and 40 seconds local time. USS Dwight D. Eisenhower was making 24 knots on course 286 inches, the eastern Arabian Sea, when the first Iranian torpedo finally broke classification. The contact appeared on USS Mason's sonar display as Track Sierra 411, bearing 198 relative, depth 38 feet, speed 41 knots, range 2,940 yards, inbound to the carrier's starboard quarter. It had already come from below the thermal layer. It had already passed the escort screen, and if the track held, it would reach the carrier's wake in 43 seconds, and the hull in 67. The danger was exact. A hit below the starboard shaft alley could flood propulsion spaces, jam flight deck recovery, and turn a 100,000-ton carrier into a slow target in under 4 minutes. But inside Mason's acoustic control station, Lieutenant Mara Ellison was staring at the real problem. Only one torpedo was on the screen. At 0 hours, 43 minutes, and 12 seconds, she had logged a 2-tube water hammer transient from the same bearing line. 2 launches, not one. CIC was fighting the weapon everyone could hear. The one that mattered was still silent. Eisenhower had 43 seconds before the visible torpedo crossed her wake, 71 seconds before the standard evasive turn would commit the carrier to a predicted course change, and 96 seconds before the unseen weapon reached the exact point where that maneuver was supposed to save her. To understand what is happening, you need to understand what a carrier strike group expects from an underwater attack, and what it does not. A carrier is built to project force hundreds of miles outward. Its escorts build the underwater picture. Its radar can control a sky full of aircraft and missiles. None of that matters if a submarine gets beneath the layer, outside the passive geometry, and forces the carrier to solve the wrong problem first. What the system believed was happening was not what was actually happening. Mason's AN SQS 53C had classified one fast inbound torpedo. Doctrine said the answer was immediate. Deploy the nearest acoustic decoy, order the carrier into a hard evasive turn, increase speed, shift the escorts to prosecute the firing bearing, and clear the flight deck, because underwater threats erase every other priority. That response works against a submarine trying to hit the carrier with the first shot. The first problem was visible. The second problem was the one that mattered. Iran was not using the first torpedo as the kill shot. Iran was using it as a steering command. The visible attack was only the outer layer. The loud weapon forced the carrier into a predictable emergency maneuver. The quiet weapon waited at the point where doctrine would place the ship 96 seconds later. Iran did not design the weapon to defeat the defense. Iran designed it to make the defense irrelevant. The real danger was somewhere else. 4 hours earlier, almost nobody cared what Lieutenant Ellison heard. At 0 hours, 43 minutes, and 12 seconds, while the strike group was still outside the highest alert posture, Mason's towed array had picked up a 1.7-second propulsion signature on bearing 061, narrowband spikes at 41 Hz and 82 Hz, then a brief metallic double impulse consistent with tube flooding. The contact disappeared under merchant noise within 26 seconds. Ellison wrote exactly 18 words in the acoustic log: probable battery runner submarine, 2-tube prep, decoy geometry possible, request widen search leg south-southwest. The note was passed up. It was not ignored. It was simply buried under the fact that no confirmed hull had been localized, no periscope had been sighted, and no second contact had emerged. An Iranian submarine hidden below a warm water layer, pacing a U.S. carrier through clutter, sounded possible but unproven. Ellison was not the tactical action officer. She was not the air defense commander. She was not even the loudest voice in sonar. She was the officer who kept writing down small things other people could not connect fast enough. At 2 hours, 17 minutes, and 46 seconds, while CIC on Mason called out Sierra 411 and Eisenhower's bridge prepared the standard port evasive turn, Ellison looked at the earlier log, looked at the current bearing drift, and understood the trap. If the carrier turned port to 248 and accelerated through 28 knots, the visible torpedo would miss or be seduced. But the second torpedo, probably wire-guided until terminal homing, would arrive not at the carrier's current wake, but at the wake the carrier was about to generate. She keyed the undersea action circuit and said 6 words that froze the room for 2 seconds. Do not give them port turn. The strike group ASW commander asked for a reason. Ellison gave him 1 in 11 seconds. 2-tube transient earlier, 1 loud runner now. Second fish quiet. Predicted intercept is post-evasion wake point, not current track. If Eisenhower turns left, she turns into the kill basket. If she holds speed and shifts right 11 degrees, the quiet fish loses geometry and the firing wire must stay connected longer. That last part mattered. A submarine close enough to guide a torpedo through the carrier's future wake had to keep its fire control solution coherent. That meant time. That meant exposure. That meant the U.S. response did not need to be aggressive first. It needed to be smarter first. At 2 hours, 17 minutes, and 58 seconds, Rear Admiral Thomas Hale embarked on Eisenhower, had 9 seconds to decide whether to follow doctrine or trust a lieutenant on an escort destroyer, arguing that the obvious escape route was the ambush point. He asked one question: "Can you prove second weapon?" Ellison answered, "No, sir. I can prove 2 tubes and 1 display." That was enough. At 2 hours, 18 minutes, and 7 seconds, the order changed. Eisenhower did not take the doctrinal port break. She came 11 degrees right to course 297. Speed was cut from 24 knots to 19 for 22 seconds, then ordered back to 25. A sequence designed to tear apart the firing solution, a wake-homing torpedo needed while denying a wire-guided operator a stable, predicted stern track. USS Mason streamed AN, SLQ, 25 Nixie to starboard. USS Gravely shifted 1,100 yards south to open a clean, dipping sonar lane. An MH-60R Seahawk from HSM-74, already airborne as plane guard, turned hard toward Datum at 142 knots and dumped a 5-buoy pattern across the bearing line at 2 hours, 18 minutes, and 21 seconds. The response was now a timing fight. At 2 hours, 18 minutes, and 24 seconds, Sierra 411 altered 9 degrees toward Mason's decoy and increased broadband noise. That was the first confirmation that the loud torpedo had done exactly what Ellison thought it was built to do. It was not preserving stealth anymore, because its job was no longer to hit the carrier. Its job was to keep every eye and every processor fixed on the wrong axis. What the system believed was happening was not what was actually happening. At 2 hours, 18 minutes, and 31 seconds, the second torpedo appeared for 4.8 seconds and vanished again, bearing 203 relative from Eisenhower. Range estimate 1,880 yards. Depth 52 feet. Speed 33 knots. Quiet battery propulsion. No active ping, no dramatic acoustic signature. Just enough return from the sonobuoy field to reveal the shape of the real attack. It had not gone to the carrier's current wake. It had gone to where the carrier should have been if she had turned left on schedule. Ellison did not celebrate. She did the math. If the submarine operator recognized the carrier had broken doctrine, he could cut guidance, reassign terminal logic, and still push the torpedo into a new wake intercept in 38 to 44 seconds. The visible attack was only the outer layer. The real danger was still moving. At 2 hours, 18 minutes, and 39 seconds, the Seahawk lowered its AN, AQS, 2-2 ALFS dipping sonar. First cycle, no solid hold. Second cycle, transient machinery. Third cycle, contact. Bearing 059 from the helicopter. Range 3,600 yards. Depth 184 feet. Not a merchant, not a false return. A compact diesel-electric hull moving too slowly to be surface traffic and too deliberately to be random clutter. The acoustic profile matched an Iranian Fateh-class submarine at 72% confidence. Electric motor signature, intermittent auxiliary pump noise, short rudder correction, then silence. The submarine had stayed below the layer, let the loud torpedoes shape the fight, and expected the carrier to turn itself into the second weapon's path. Iran did not design the weapon to defeat the defense. Iran designed it to make the defense irrelevant. But the plan had a weakness. It depended on the US responding automatically. Once Ellison broke that assumption, the submarine had to improvise under pressure. At 2 hours, 18 minutes and 47 seconds, the second torpedo reacquired the carrier's altered wake for 3.1 seconds, then lost it when Eisenhower surged back to 25 knots and shifted 6 degrees farther right. That tiny change mattered, because wake homing is not magic. It is geometry plus persistence. The torpedo needed a coherent disturbance field and a target behaving like a large ship under standard evasion. It got neither. At 2 hours, 18 minutes and 52 seconds, Sierra 411, the loud torpedo, crossed 140 yards astern of Mason's decoy and detonated 11 seconds later after a failed reattack, throwing a pressure plume that rocked the destroyer but caused no structural damage. 0 U.S. sailors were killed, 2 were injured by shock, and 1 AN SLQ-25 Fairlead was damaged. The first problem was now finished. The second problem was not. At 2 hours, 19 minutes and 3 seconds, the quiet torpedo came back on the Seahawk's buoy net at speed 31 knots, then drifted 14 degrees off the carrier's stern line. It was searching. It had been sent to kill a ship that was no longer where the submarine's fire control computer had placed it. On Eisenhower, the Combat Direction Center restored propulsion control, canceled the emergency deck freeze, and kept the air wing spotted but held. Nobody on the carrier could celebrate because the weapon was still in the water and the submarine was still alive. The real danger was somewhere else. At 2 hours, 19 minutes and 14 seconds, Ellison made the call that turned defense into reversal. She told the ASW commander not to waste the first kill shot on the torpedo. Kill the wire lane. Kill the submarine's ability to update anything. The Fateh-class boat was still on the same bearing chain because to move fast enough to escape would expose machinery noise through the layer. To stay slow enough to remain hidden meant staying near its launch box. The Seahawk pivoted 18 degrees, shifted 1,200 yards east, and at 2 hours, 19 minutes and 28 seconds, dropped a Mark 54 lightweight torpedo on the submarine datum, set for search depth 220 feet. That was the intelligent reversal. Not a blind rush, not a dramatic bombardment, a strike against the one node that made the whole ambush work. At 2 hours, 19 minutes and 36 seconds, the Iranian submarine finally reacted. Buoy 4 caught a hard turn to port, sudden propeller acceleration, then a burst of acoustic countermeasure noise. Too late. The Mark 54 had entered the water 480 yards ahead of the submarine's projected track. It did not need the perfect picture. It needed enough water and enough time. At 2 hours, 19 minutes and 49 seconds, the quiet inbound torpedo made its last meaningful attempt to reacquire the carrier. It cut across Eisenhower's old stern line, passed 210 yards aft, turned, and lost the wake completely. It did not strike. It did not even force a final radical maneuver. The weapon had been aimed at a future the carrier never entered. What the system believed was happening was not what was actually happening. At 2 hours, 20 minutes and 2 seconds, the Mk-54 heard the submarine. At 2 hours, 20 minutes and 9 seconds, it locked. At 2 hours, 20 minutes and 17 seconds, the Fateh-class boat dumped one more decoy and tried to dive through 240 feet. It failed because the layer that had hidden it now trapped its own noise. At 2 hours, 20 minutes and 24 seconds, the torpedo detonated under the aft machinery section. The acoustic picture changed instantly. Broadband rupture, metal failure, rapid flooding, then a violent upward bubble pulse. The submarine was not sunk in a cinematic flash. It was destroyed in the exact way submariners fear most. Loss of quiet, loss of buoyancy control, loss of electrical stability, then irreversible water. At 2 hours, 20 minutes and 41 seconds, the boat surfaced bow high for 19 seconds, listing 23 degrees to port, then rolled back and disappeared. Iranian rescue beacons activated on the surface. U.S. sonobuoys counted secondary implosions at 2 hours 20 minutes and 58 seconds and 2 hours 21 minutes and 11 seconds. The firing platform was gone. The ambush had failed. Only then did the strike group look at the larger design. The submarine attack had never been just a torpedo problem. The purpose was to halt carrier flight operations, fracture the screen, force emergency turns into a pre-computed underwater basket, and buy Iran a narrow window in which a U.S. carrier could be fixed, slowed, and made vulnerable to follow-on targeting from somewhere else. The visible attack was only the outer layer. If Eisenhower had taken the doctrinal turn and suffered even a near miss under the shaft line, the carrier would have lost speed, deck rhythm, and tactical freedom at the exact moment Iran needed all three disrupted. That was the actual objective, not a dramatic one-shot sinking, a controlled operational paralysis. It failed for one reason. One person in the chain understood that the missing sound mattered more than the sound everybody heard. At 2 hours 24 minutes and 33 seconds, the strike group's helicopters recovered 2 Iranian survivors from the water and marked 33 others as missing. At 2 hours 31 minutes, damage control teams on Mason reported 1 damaged decoy system, 1 buckled deck fitting, and 3 minor injuries. Eisenhower reported 0 hull damage, 0 flooding, 4 flight deck injuries from emergency maneuvering, and full recovery of flight operations by 2 hours 46 minutes and 12 seconds. At 3 hours, 8 minutes and 40 seconds, after confirming no second submarine contact remained in the area, 2 F/A-18E Super Hornets launched from Eisenhower and struck an Iranian coastal relay node near Jask with 2 GBU, 3 1J-dams, destroying the site assessed to have supported maritime queuing for the submarine's launch box. America's response was not loud at the start. It was correct at the start. Loud came later. What survived was the carrier, the air wing, the strike group's freedom to maneuver, and the idea that doctrine can still be bent before it gets people killed. What was destroyed was 1 Fateh-class submarine, 2 torpedoes, 1 coastal relay node, and the entire logic of the ambush. Iran had tried to make the carrier defend itself into a trap. It failed because the trap depended on a predictable mind inside an American system, and for 96 seconds the most important mind in that system belonged to a lieutenant no one had been waiting for, USS Dwight D. Eisenhower stayed in the fight because Mara Ellison trusted the torpedo nobody else could hear.